8 months have now passed, and the quiet morning in rural Nova Scotia was shattered by a parent's worst nightmare. Since that day, the passage of time has been measured not just in months, but in the grueling metrics of a massive police effort. 240 days of investigation, 1,500 individual tips analyzed, 8,100 videos painstakingly reviewed, and 12 search warrants executed across various locations. Among the vast array of physical evidence collected during this exhaustive search, one specific item has emerged as the central pillar of the forensic examination. It is a pink blanket, an item identified as belonging to 6-year-old Lilly Sullivan. Court documents and verified media reports reveal that this blanket has undergone intensive testing at the highest levels of forensic science. In a significant recent development in January 2026, Daniel Martell, the children's stepfather, voluntarily provided a blood sample to RCMP investigators for comparison purposes specifically related to this evidence. What the RCMP found on that blanket, why Daniel's blood sample was needed, and what the forensic results have revealed represent the most critical elements of the ongoing investigation into the disappearance of Lilly and her 4-year-old brother, Jack Sullivan. Before we can examine the intricacies of the forensic testing, we must establish the critical legal context of the case. As of this moment, Daniel Martell has not been charged with any crime related to this disappearance. He has passed multiple polygraph examinations administered by the RCMP, and the police have publicly stated that no suspects have been identified. This analysis is based strictly on publicly available court documents and verified media reports. It is an exploration of evidence, not an accusation of responsibility. The timeline of this mystery began on May 2nd, 2025. At exactly 10:01 a.m., Malaya Brooks Murray placed a frantic 911 call to report her children missing. Lilly and Jack had allegedly wandered away from their rural home in Lansdowne Station, Nova Scotia. The property is isolated, hemmed in by dense woods, steep banks, and thick, unforgiving brush. This harsh terrain led to an immediate, large-scale search effort involving 160 trained volunteers, police dogs, drones, and helicopters. At approximately 4 p.m. on that first day, searchers found the first piece of the puzzle, a pink blanket caught in a tree near Lansdowne Station Road, about 1 kilometer from the family home. While the parents identified it via photograph as Lily's, a tracking dog deployed to the scene was unable to detect any scent of the children near the blanket. This absence of a scent trail raised immediate questions. How did the blanket get there? Was it carried by the wind, dropped by a child, or placed there by someone else? The lack of a trail suggested the blanket might not have been dropped by a person on foot, or that environmental factors had already erased the evidence. The mystery of the pink blanket deepened significantly just 2 days later. On May 4th, at approximately 9:09 p.m., RCMP investigators made a second, startling discovery that would change the trajectory of the forensic timeline. According to court documents, officers found another piece of the same pink blanket. However, this piece wasn't found in the woods or on a trail. It was located inside a trash bag at the end of the family's own driveway. This discovery presented a confusing evidence pattern. One piece was snagged in a tree a kilometer away, while another was discarded in the household refuse at the property. The separation of these two pieces remains one of the most significant, unexplained elements of the public record. How did a single blanket end up in two such disparate locations? Was it torn naturally by the thick brush of the Nova Scotia wilderness, or was it deliberately separated? Investigators were forced to consider every possibility. Perhaps a child carried one piece while another remained at home, or perhaps the trash bag contained items from a cleanup that had nothing to do with the disappearance. Regardless of the theory, the RCMP treated both pieces as high-priority evidence. By July 16, 2025, the investigation had reached a stage where the RCMP felt it necessary to update the public on these findings. The Northeast Nova RCMP Major Crime Unit confirmed that the blanket seized early in the search was undergoing forensic examination. Corporal Carly McCann stated that the police were investigating if and how the item related to the children's disappearance. This careful phrasing indicated that while the blanket was a lead, its significance was still being weighed. To ensure the highest level of accuracy, the RCMP requested assistance from their National Forensic Lab in Ottawa. This federal involvement signaled that the analysis required more than just a standard local check. It required the expertise of the country's top forensic scientists. Staff Sergeant Rob McTinnon, the officer in charge, reiterated that the collective effort would continue until the circumstances of Lilly and Jack's disappearance were determined with certainty. The public acknowledgement of this testing in mid-2025 set the stage for the dramatic developments that would follow 6 months later. Forensic testing, especially at the federal level, is a slow and methodical process. It involves DNA analysis, fiber comparison, and the search for microscopic biological material. In a case with so little physical evidence to go on, the blanket became a silent witness that the RCMP was determined to make speak. As the investigation moved into 2026, the focus shifted from the lab in Ottawa back to the family home, and specifically to the DNA of those closest to the children. As the calendar turned to January 2026, the investigation entered a new, more intensive phase of forensic scrutiny. 6 months after the RCMP first announced the blanket was being tested in Ottawa, the public learned a major development regarding the children's stepfather, Daniel Martell. In an interview with Global News, Martell revealed that he had recently signed consent form and submitted a blood sample to the RCMP for genetic analysis. This was not a random request. Martell specifically linked the blood testing to the pieces of the pink blanket that had been seized months earlier. The voluntary nature of this act is a point Martell has emphasized repeatedly. He noted that the RCMP did not require a warrant to obtain his DNA because he provided it willingly, asserting his desire to help the investigation in any way possible. According to Martell, he watched investigators check the box for himself, which he interpreted as an indication that he had no criminal involvement. While this statement reflects Martell's personal perspective, the fact that a blood sample was requested at all is highly significant in a forensic context. It implies that the RCMP's examination of the blanket had identified something, a substance or a trace, that required direct comparison to a known genetic profile. In the world of forensic science, there are several reasons why investigators would need a family member's blood. The most common is exclusionary testing. In a household where children live, their blankets will naturally be covered in the DNA of the people who care for them. To find a foreign profile, police must first map out the expected profiles. By testing Martell, they can subtract his DNA from the evidence, leaving behind anything that shouldn't be there. However, DNA testing can also be used to establish a chain of custody or to identify the source of specific biological materials like saliva, skin cells, or blood. The use of a blood sample, rather than a simple cheek swab, is also notable. Blood provides a robust and comprehensive DNA profile, often used in laboratories dealing with complex or degraded samples found in the environment. While Martell has characterized the testing as a routine step to clear his name, the RCMP has remained silent on the specifics. They have not disclosed whether the material on the blanket was a recent addition or something that had been there for years. This silence is typical of an active investigation, where the exact nature of a biological find is a holdback fact, something only the police and the person responsible would know. As the lab results were processed, the investigation continued to balance these scientific leads against the backdrop of the family's complex personal dynamics. While the pink blanket has become the most scrutinized piece of physical evidence, it is only one part of a much larger forensic net cast by the RCMP. To understand the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, investigators have had to look far beyond fabric and DNA. Court documents reveal a multifaceted approach that includes digital forensics, environmental analysis, and behavioral sciences. For instance, early in the search, investigators discovered boot prints in the woods near the property. These prints were found in 2 sizes, including child-sized marks on a nearby pipeline. Whether these belonged to the Sullivan children or were left by previous hikers or searchers remains a point of intense study. The digital footprint of the family has been under just as much pressure as the physical ground. Search warrants were executed for the cell phone records of both Malaya Brooks Murray and Daniel Martell. This wasn't just about reading text messages. It involved analyzing ping data from cell towers to track movement, reviewing internet search histories, and examining banking records for timestamps of financial transactions. In the modern era, a person's digital life provides an independent, unalterable timeline that can either confirm or contradict a witness's statement. The RCMP also pulled video surveillance from the Cobequid Pass Highway toll section and local school buses, hoping to catch a glimpse of a vehicle or a person that didn't belong in Lansdowne Station on May 2nd. This breadth of investigation, combining the microscopic world of DNA with the macroscopic world of highway surveillance, demonstrates the no stone left unturned philosophy of the major crime unit. Each piece of data is a tile in a mosaic. If the cell phone data shows a phone was at the family home while a blanket piece was being placed a kilometer away, those two facts must be reconciled. If the banking records show a card being used miles away during the window of disappearance, the timeline must shift. The complexity of this case is further heightened by the terrain itself. The RCMP's Behavioral Sciences Division has likely been tasked with analyzing the discovery pattern of the evidence. They must ask, is it typical for a lost child to leave a blanket in a tree, but leave no scent for a dog? Is it typical for a piece of that same blanket to end up in a trash bag? These are the questions that move an investigation from a missing persons case towards something else. Staff Sergeant Rob McSenon has noted that while the case was not initially believed to be criminal, that assessment is constantly under review. The forensic results from the blanket, when paired with the digital and physical evidence, will ultimately determine if the status of this case changes from a tragic accident to a criminal inquiry. In any investigation of this magnitude, it is essential to separate what is factually established from what remains speculative. As we stand 8 months into the search for Lilly and Jack Sullivan, the factual pillars are clear but limited. We know that a pink blanket belonging to Lilly was discovered in 2 pieces in 2 different locations, one in a tree a kilometer from the home and one in a household trash bag. We know that by July 2025, the RCMP had escalated the analysis of this blanket to a federal level, involving specialized DNA and fiber analysis. We know that in January 2026, Daniel Martell voluntarily provided a blood sample specifically to be compared against findings on that blanket. Finally, we know that no charges have been filed and no suspects have been named. However, the unknowns in this case are far more substantial and arguably more critical. The most significant secret held by investigators is the exact nature of what was found on the blanket. While the public knows DNA comparison is happening, the RCMP has never disclosed that they found blood, saliva, skin cells, or some other biological material. They have not revealed that the something found on the blanket suggests a struggle, an accident, or simply prolonged contact. Furthermore, while Daniel Martell has been public about his DNA submission, it remains unknown if other family members, such as the children's mother, Malaya Brooks Murray, or their biological father, have been asked to provide similar samples for comparison. The results of the DNA comparison itself remain under a veil of investigative secrecy. Whether the DNA on the blanket matched Martell, excluded him entirely, or pointed toward a completely unknown third party is information that only the RCMP and the lab in Ottawa currently possess. This silence is a strategic necessity. In a missing persons case that could potentially turn into a criminal prosecution, the premature release of forensic findings could jeopardize the integrity of a future trial. If a match was found, investigators would need to determine if there is an innocent explanation, such as Martell simply handling the blanket during normal household chores, before making any public accusations. The investigative significance of the blanket is also a matter of internal judgment. Is it the smoking gun of the case, or is it a minor clue that has been overanalyzed due to a lack of other evidence? Without knowing the quantity and context of the material found, the public is left to wonder. As Staff Sergeant Rob McSenon has emphasized, some steps must remain confidential to protect the long-term goal of justice. This tension between the public's desire for answers and the police's need for secrecy defines the current state of the Sullivan case. The blanket stands as a silent witness, but the story it tells is currently whispered only in the halls of the RCMP's major crime units. As the investigation into the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan continues, the role of forensic science has become more than just a tool. It is a primary hope for a resolution. Expert commentators, including former detectives and criminology professors like Mike Arntfield, have noted that in cases where initial ground searches fail to produce remains or clothing, any physical item found takes on a massive, almost singular importance. The pink blanket, being one of the only items directly linked to the children found outside the immediate residence, is a focal point of this effort. The fact it was found in two pieces, separated by a significant distance, suggests a narrative that science is now trying to reconstruct. Modern forensic capabilities have advanced to a point where even trace amounts of genetic material, often called touch DNA, can be harvested from fabric. With the involvement of federal labs, the RCMP is likely employing the most sophisticated techniques available, potentially including vacuum metal deposition to fine print on fabric or advanced sequencing to untangle complex mixtures of DNA from multiple people. The request for a blood sample from Daniel Martell in early 2026 suggests that these advanced techniques did indeed find a profile that required a high-quality comparison. Martell's cooperation in this process is a key narrative element. He has positioned himself as a transparent partner to police, banking on the idea that the science will eventually clear him of any lingering suspicion. However, the clock is ticking. Each day that passes without a discovery makes the forensic evidence harder to interpret. Environmental exposure can degrade DNA, and a chain of custody for an item found in a tree by family members rather than police can be challenged in court. Despite these hurdles, the RCMP remains publicly confident. Staff Sergeant McSinon has described the investigation as methodical and complex, asserting that his team is assessing information daily. The forensic results from the blanket will eventually be paired with the digital data from cell phones and the visual evidence from surveillance cameras to create a final, comprehensive report. For the community of Lansdowne Station and the families involved, the wait for these results is agonizing. Forensic science is rarely as fast as it appears on television. It is a slow, painstaking process of elimination. Whether the pink blanket eventually provides a definitive answer to what happened on May 2nd, 2025, or whether it remains a frustratingly ambiguous clue, is yet to be seen. What is certain is that the RCMP is committed to the pursuit of truth through every available scientific avenue. 8 months after 2 children vanished into the Nova Scotia wilderness, the investigation remains a race between the fading trail of the past and the emerging clarity of forensic science.